C'est Thomas qui va commencer. Vous avez le début pour relier l'autre personne. Peut-être qu'on commence par une sur le
tu connectes? Non. Oui,
non, c'est bon. Mais c'est comme vous voulez.
C'est comme vous voulez. Véronique.
Il faut d'abord remettre en marche.
Because of the
I don't know where it is. You don't have to introduce me. So my presentation will be quick, will be in fact sort of summing up what we have said until now, because it's fascinating to see how much we are coherent with our ideas without telling each other what we were going to say. And so, my topics initially is about children's play in sanctuaries, and now I call it sanctuaries as playgrounds, because I think that's probably what it was. And for me, that research started with Plato laws, very special notice of Plato, a very interesting one, because it's a quotation from the laws that tell us a lot about the care for children, for young children, and the care for education. So he says that children of this age, so the very small ones, have games which come by natural instinct, and they generally invent them among themselves whenever they meet together. So it tells us a lot of things that are otherwise completely lost. That children are playing together, that they are inventing games, which he doesn't tell us which ones, but it's something, a knowledge that everybody knows. As soon as they have reached the age of 3, so he's really speaking of very young children. All the children from 3 to 6 must meet together at the village temple. So again, we have this community of children and this expression, the village temple. So he really speaks of yera, so of temples. And so they must meet there, those belonging to each village assembling at the same place. So again, this idea of community, and community made by common play, and common play in sanctuaries, not in place. Moreover, the nurses of his children must watch over the behavior, whether it will be orderly or disorderly. And that's very interesting too, because we see this caretaker, they watch, but they don't interfere. And those who work on pedagogy and history of games from the educative viewpoint say there are 3 different types of societies: those that neglect games as being totally useless, those that tolerate games and don't interfere much with the children, and those that really incite children to play and sometimes even make toys for children, makes games specifically for children. And I think that in the Greek world, we are in the 3rd type, though, as here, the nurses don't interfere, they just watch the children play. And we will come back to this notion of play without adult management. In the Greek anthology, this is for Hannah, you know, we are building the great anthology. It is online for us at the moment, and it's a common pot. So when we find a text, and all these texts are now posted on the anthologies called Switch, we have a platform, and so we enrich as we go this database, simple word database. And so there is this text in the Greek anthology. So play, what kind of play did they do in sanctuaries? Well, play with animals, and it fits well with what we have seen. The children, Billy Goat, and so they are in this play, in this poem, there is an address to the goat, have put purple reins on you and a muzzle on your birded face, and they train you to race like a horse round the god's temple, that he may look on their childish joy. So everything is there. The children play in the sanctuary, they play with animals, and it's just what we see on these vessels. The goat is here, and you see them with crown in a festival context, and doing the race with the goat like a horse rounds the god's temple. So again, Naos this time, Naos. The Munichus is very interesting, and what is very interesting is that we see the agency of these children. What are they doing? It is like with the last spot you showed us, we don't know exactly what they are doing. What is important is that we are seeing them active. We are both of them active. We see the gesture, something is on, whatever it is. And there is a presence of the sanctuary, which is, it's not that they are realistically depicted in the sanctuary, but it's a surrounding. It's a surrounding, and it fits well with what Plato says and many others. And what Plato says, that is interesting, it is that precisely he says that children invent games, and we know by Piaget, for instance, that children do invent marble games, and there is a famous paper by Piaget on marble games by children, inventing rules that are forever lost because they are not written down, they are not transmitted to adults, it stays between children. So maybe that's what the painter wanted, the feeling that the painter wanted to us to have. So I went on thinking, what are they doing? So whatever game it is, they are interacting in a playful way. We can, as for your board games, we can decide what kind of game it is, but the action is there. In Pollux onomasticon, and I did not translate it into English, but I will comment it. So in Pollux onomasticon, there is a lot about children agency in the sanctuary, not just putting reins on a goat and mimicking a race, but sometimes they invent rites. And in Pollux, one of the passages that Salvatore translated for us, he tells us that in Boeotia there is a cult to Heracles with apples. And for what reasons? It's because of the children. The children invented the rite. They were going to sacrifice an animal, a ram. They couldn't come because of the river, whatever. And les enfants, the children in the sanctuary, accomplished a rite as a game. So they play and they perform for the first time the specific rite. So they took an apple. Alors, it's more difficult than to translate. Placer dessus ce fruit 4 écorces. Comment est-ce qu'on dit écorce en anglais? They place on top of, well, they make a construction. It's not Lego, but they make a construction. Yes, we have a Lego play with my children. Ils prirent une belle pomme, placèrent au-dessous de ce fruit 4 écorces. Ils en ajoutèrent 2 au-dessus, like horns. And they played making a sacrifice of the apple as if it were an ox. And since they say that Heracles, and we know by other sources that Heracles enjoyed playing with children, it's another story, so that Heracles was happy with his sacrifice, and until today it is a rite, it is a ceremony that is performed in that sanctuary, and that's why Heracles is called Melon, because of that sacrifice of the apple invented by children. So children in sanctuaries can invent rites, and adults take on the rite, which is quite extraordinary. So it's a very strong agency. Now sometimes the games can go wrong. Tu arrives à enlever ce zoom en haut parce qu'il mange toujours lent.
Je sais pas.
Ok. Non, ça rien, on ne touche pas parce que c'est encore pire. So we understood that these games are not managed by adults, but sometimes they can invent a rite, but sometimes it can go really very wrong. And Vespasianias, who tell us about the temple of Artemis, Condylea, and they say that the name of a goddess was changed for the following reason. Some children, the number of whom is not recorded. Very interesting information. So again, we have a group of children. So we have again this collectivity of children. They are acting, but what are they doing? So here we don't know. They don't even know the number. We don't know girls, boys, children. They are all together. While playing about the sanctuary. So again, the word is really paizonta, they are in the Yeron, and they are really playing there, found a rope and tying it around the neck of the image, and the word is agalmata, said that Artemis was being strangled. And that play makes me think, that's why I put the doll, the so-called doll that is not a doll because it's an object that has to do with rites, because these dolls have always a hole on top of the head, almost always, and they were made to be hung. So, in fact, we may have a mention here of children repeating, mimicking what older children would do at the rite of passage, becoming adult, bringing the doll and suspending the doll to a tree, but they are doing it with the wrong thing. And no adult is there to say, no, don't do it with this, you must do it with another object. So they hang it, and it ends very badly. The Kafians, detecting what the children had done, stoned them to death. So they are punished, and even in a terrible way. So they were playing by themselves, doing something stupid, and they are terribly punished. When they had done this, a malady befell their women, so they are punished too, whose babies were stillborn, until the Pythian priestess bade them bury the children, sacrifice to them every year. A sacrifice is made to heroes because they had been wrongly put to death. So it's a very fascinating story showing, we have long discussion about it, how rites, play, performance go together. And here we see well the contiguities. Now, in sanctuaries, you may have institutionalized games, in the sense that we have a few sources telling us about ball games for Aphrodite in Athens, and I'm sure that we have a best expert here with Vicky, and she may tell us more about it, and I'll very quickly just mention it. In Plutarch, Moralia, the lives of the orators, Antiphon, says that on the Acropolis there is a ball ground of the Arephoroi, as some have said. And this ball ground is very interesting, and Arephoroi, these are these girls between 7 and 11 weaving clothes for the goddess, and among things, or maybe it seems, they played ball. There was a ball ground. So why? So to keep them distracted while they are working, and some have tried to see where it is. Here I take it from the book of Gratian Pirenne on Aphrodite, maybe it's the number 13, that is here on the north slope, so there are many discussion. And the only sherd that can be depiction that may relate to that ball game for Aphrodite, it is this Hydria in Tübingen, the Cleophon painter, where there is the name of Aphrodite, that's the seated woman, and you have the girl with a ball, and another one maybe playing with her. So we may have allusion to that, and to this performance. And an interesting element, iconic element, is the hair of a girl, loose hair that comes back very often when girls are playing, very often. And in fact, this topic of ball games come back and back as being also a metaphor training for love, of seducing as here, you know, this Boeotian skiffos, Boeotian skiffos. Very nice, because the girl is playing balls with a glass painting on this companion amphora, which is in the Louvre, and very interesting because there are two plays. In fact, it's a kind of ephedrismos, and the Eros is throwing a ball. And when I said that these are two games, maybe this is just another version of a game fixed in Pollux, and that's one of the problems we have to address, this distance, chronological distance between Pollux and what we actually have in vase painting. So there is this agency of women, and that's one I like, because this is a lebes gamikos, so a woman juggling with apples, not balls, but apples. There is contiguity between apples and balls, and lebes gamikos, that's the woman preparing to get married. So we have this idea of balls being a transition, an image of a transition, but not just transition. It's a question of agency. So we find again agency of girls in this kind of pictures, because she is acting over her fate, and because we will soon start, I will mention divination. You must know that the divination implies also throwing balls, juggling. So play activity can be related to divination. And in the papyri, Graiki, Magiki, you can even play with apples, throw apples, and it is a love spell. And I show you also this this cup in Chicago, and in the middle you have an Eros crowning the lady who is the girl. It's Parthenos, probably juggling, and by this juggling in this. And in fact, the more I progress, the more I find references to play in sanctuaries that were not seen because they are in a story that has not to do with that. So just to show you one, that's Ovidius, with a story of Acontius and Cydippe. You know that these lovers, where do they meet? In Aede Dianae, in the temple, in the sanctuary of Diana. So that's the boy, he sees the girls, and what does he do? He throws to her a ball, which is an apple, and on it it's written, I promise I will only marry Acontius, and or her fate is there. So I note that in the sanctuary they were playing. There was play. It needed to take place there. Okay, and so just to show you the kind of connection that is going on, a passage in Servius, where we read that the Tauros, Zeus, arrives in Sidon, and he sees Europe, who is playing with her friends in the temple of Aesculapius, in Tempo Aesculapi. So they are playing in the sanctuary again. Dedicating toys, I will go quickly. We have seen quite a number. But it's quite interesting to see that such epigram can be read through all that implies the word paidzain, to play in Greek. It implies performance, it implies music, it implies seduction. To play is also to seduce, and implies performing rites. And so Timareta will dedicate to Artemis the tambourine, the music, the ball, the play, and the cord that kept up her hair, so it has to do with seduction, and her dolls, it has to do with rites, with the rite that went wrong in Condylea, and their dresses. But there are not only dedication of children, one should remember that there are also dedication of adults, including the dye. And we know it by Pausanias, that in the temple of Tyche in Nemea, no, it's at Nargos, in the temple of Tyche, Palamedes dedicated the dyes that he had invented. And the dye you see here, these ones, come from the Acropolis. And work should be done on the dyes found on the Acropolis. What kind of dyes, what period, what do we know about the context? There is nothing, but whatever, there are designs on it, and even very interesting ones. Some say that here is the face of a man, maybe it's Palamedes himself, who knows. So we have a few mentions of, for instance, knuckle bones being dedicated in the Asclepion in Athens, or we know the story of a boy who says to the god that if he's healed, I will give you 10 dice, and the god laughed. Okay, what you know less, it is that games can be really part of these rites of passage and visualized through jewelry and through amulets. And I always like to compare that to what is now very trendy and concerning the same age group, which is the Pandora jewelry. I don't know if you know Pandora jewelry. Fantastic, because there is a whole set of little beads that you can buy, and you buy them when something happens in your life. And clearly the clients are young women, either near marriage or just married or the first child, but just the same age group, in a society, our society, where these rites of passage do not take place the same way. So this is a string of miniature gold amulets from a tomb in Akantos. Unfortunately, we have no more bones of the deceased, so we don't know, girl or boy, but most likely girl, you will see why. And you see the vocabulary of these amulets. So there are standard things such as the double axe, the hand, the phylacterium, the club, maybe a knot, yes, and the pomegranate. And so as it is used in rites of marriage, that's why I think it belonged to a girl. But it's miniature, so everything is at the same scale. And what is wonderful, we have a knuckle bone, there's a knuckle bone, and I even identified the top. There is even a top there. And there is a turtle, and I cannot help thinking it may be an allusion to Pollux Calicalone, which was a famous rhyme of girls and play of Parthenoi. Maybe it's an allusion to that. There's also Silenus, and you may think of the game of the mask with Silenus. We can discuss it. So it's quite fascinating to have this range of elements, and in that, at least 3 or 4 toys, which is quite amazing. So play, game, and divination. Game, and it came back and back, is contiguous, can be contiguous with divination for different reasons. And it's very clear here on this Apollyon Pelike in Matera, where we have Eros in the middle with a whip, and we have the sabot, the top, the spinning top. But what is around him, above him, there is the bird of Aphrodite. Behind him, a girl with a ball. And before him, a beautiful, so let's see him better. So Eros, and the girl watching how it moves. And one parallel in literature to that, what is on? Maybe it's love divination. Why? In the Greek anthology, there is an epigram about one of the 7 sage, wise men, Pittacus, who is consulted by a man who wants to marry. He doesn't know whom she should marry. He hesitates between 2 women. One has almost the same status as him, and the other one is much more wealthy. And what does the wise man say? Go and look at the children who are playing. And so he goes and he sees the boys at the broad crossroads, not the sanctuary, but at the broad crossroads, where whipping the swift tops. Go after them. Drive the way that suits you. They were saying, drive the way that suits you. The stranger, hearing this, refrain from catching at a match with a greater home, understanding the oracle of a boy's words. So what the boys say spontaneously while playing is an oracle, is an important one. And she understands, because they say drive the way that suits you, that he should marry the woman of the same status as him and not a more wealthy one. And so it makes us think, what is really Heracles doing there? So he's whipping the top, the spinning top here, with a large movement. Of course, he's showing mastery. because if you speak with people working on this object, they tell you how difficult it is to use them. That's why it's not a toy for young children. It's a toy. It's not a toy. It's an activity for young men, like the one. And this one shows how surprised he is. So whereas Hermes demonstrates his mastery, he demonstrates his spontaneity. So there is a contrast between the two, and the top just in the middle of the circular medallion. But Hermes and the top, it makes us think too, because we know by Pseudo-Apollodorus that Hermes was also the god of divining by pebbles, by rhapsophory. So he's not any god. He's a god accompanying young children, but he's also a master of a specific type of divination that we meet in specific context. So he gave him the pipe and learned the art of divining by pebbles. And this is a question that I asked him, and maybe we can discuss it. I wonder whether the Sotades cup with the spinning top here, it's white ground, it comes from the tombs, very special context, much debated context. Is it really just a play, or has it another meaning? Because the matera pellice, the eros, it seems to have to do with the question that the young woman is asking: will I have a good marriage or not? So has it to do with this? Same question for other scenes, like this one's. It's a fragmentary white ground lekythos, so funerary lekythos, put in a tomb in Athens, and one of the girl has move her top that is here, and again the question: what is it about? What is it about? Is it that as long as it turns, you are alive? Well, there are many possibilities beyond just. It is a depiction of daily life in Athens, and I think it's certainly much more complex. So this question of divination, we know it well, of course, with knucklebones. I will not return to this, but there are so many texts also that we can convoke, like in the Greek anthology, the baby Eros playing knucklebones in the morning, played my soul away, and we have gems, all kinds, where you have Eros and the four sides, and the good Venus, the Aphrodite throw. But I will just return and finish with kledonomancy. There is a proverb, a Greek proverb: truthful are wine and children, you know. And it has to do also with this word, spontaneous word of children, but not in any context, in the context of sanctuaries. And in fact, there is a whole little list that we can make, and I will just show you one or two of these passages. Plutarch, Isis and Osiris. It's about Isis wandering around and asking questions, and she enters a temple. Wherefore the Egyptians think that little children possess the power of prophecy, and they try to divine the future from the portents which they find in children's words, and that's important, especially when children are playing about in holy places. So play of children in sanctuaries is something very special. And it's not just Plutarch, Isis and Osiris, it has to do with Egypt again in Pliny. In Pliny, he says an ox is even worshipped in place of a god. Its name is Apis. And when we go down, I'll just pick this sentence. You have all kinds of events in the temple. Companies of boys escorted, singing a song in his honor. These companies are suddenly seized with frenzy and chant prophecies of future events. So again, it's a collection being done. So if you come across another text, let me know about Dio Chrysostom. And you know that lads at play announce the purpose of a god, and that this form of divination has proved to be free from falsehood. Or children without, who are playing and dancing to the music of pipes become inspired and so foretell future. So it's quite fascinating, and it explains why we know that children were used to draw lots, for instance, and not only in antiquity. Cicero on divination says that when you draw lots, you must use a child. What reliance, pray, can you put in these lots, which at fortune's nod are shuffled and drawn by the hand of a child, a puer? It's very important to use a child. Sarah Johnson wrote a nice paper about the use of children in divination, and this also we can discuss. And Ulrich told me that for drawing lots in lotteries, and even until today, one uses always children, because children are special, and when it is about, so not divination, but drawing lots, it's something important. So it makes me think of all these scenes of play that we have on Altipa's painting, like the swing. Is it a swing? Not really, not just, because they are of course on a swing, but at the same time there is an eros in the middle, so it's just not any swing. It's again, it has to do with love oracles. Or here, there are even two erotes on the swing, so no more girls, and what is between could allude to the belt of a marriage that is expected to take place. And I finished with Roberta Daniaux, Why We Play. I said that her work is very inspiring, and she explains that playing by its structure allows people to overcome the undetermined. And that's why in all this scene with Achilles and Ajax, the play is never finished, because this undetermined dimension is something very important. So they are making gestures, it's not yet done. This explains why so many divinatory or propitiatory practices are structured as games. And that's why I was wondering whether this board that we may interpret as board games may not be for something else and not for a game, and why conversely the act of playing is willingly seen as being somewhat augural. And that's one of the big discussions, is that Achilles and Ajax, when they are playing, they are perhaps thinking the one who wins is the one who will not die the first, and we know it's the contrary, in fact, what we see, because the gods are always behind the throw of the dice. Ares will decide the issue with his dice. You know what is attributed to Einstein, that God doesn't play with dice. Well, Greek gods play all the time, and they all play all the time. And if you are interested by Knucklebones, you must absolutely try our iPad consultation of Oracle. It is free, you can download it on App Store. And we did it for the exhibition that took place in 2014. And when you download it, it's on our website, you can download it. You can see the Temple of Apollo in Claros. And I'm very grateful to Jean-Charles Moretti, who provided us with the map. Because the extraordinary thing is that here, in the Crépis, it's full of bronze knucklebones. And nobody knows it really. 316. They are stuck. So they must have been shining. And no text says that there is an oracle with knucklebones in Claros. But the temple tells us that there is something on. And so if you do it, so if you enter, yes, you click, and then you have a result, and you see what it gives. You can share the oracle, you can try again if you're not happy, and it's what you find on your shirt probably in Maréchal. It has to do with travel, with marriage, with economy, with all this, and work must absolutely be done on that list. Because why is 1111 that God, and the last one another God? What is the meaning of a list, the structure of a list? There is much more work to do. And I finish with this one, Didyma, Temple of Apollo. What do we do with these marks on the Temple of Leto, Pentagrammae, or elsewhere? Didyma is full of board games. Is it just to wait? As Ulrich mentioned, we cannot imagine, first we couldn't imagine the children play in sanctuaries. Yes, they did play in sanctuaries, so why not pilgrims play while waiting to have the oracle? Or is it more, some said that while you were waiting, somebody would come and say, well, don't pay the priest, come to me and I will tell you what happens. So it's quite important, this question of what happens in sanctuaries, what was allowed, not allowed, and deconstructing our modern view, especially about children, because that's really something that emerged very strongly now, collecting all these little pieces of evidence that sanctuaries were playgrounds. Yes, thank you. And we have time for some discussion. I skipped elements so that we can discuss. or bring more text, because it's very funny. I really like Acontios and Cutipe is reading it over again, but I realized that where they throw each other balls that are apples or apples, it's a sanctuary again. But I'm sure there is more to find. The wet days. And I have shown as well that in fact on gens, it's interesting to see Hermes using hoops as a hoop, the wheel of Tuque. So we see this cultural notion of playing as having to do also with luck, and that one can invest in that direction. Yes. And so these are so-called magical gems. And in fact, it's a kind of taking the scheme of Eros with a hoop and transforming it into Hermes and the wheel of Tuque, to be lucky. But it's just to say that it fits perfectly what each of you have said. That there is dedication of toys, there is presence of children playing. So I think the Karaya children, they are actually playing in the sanctuary.
Yeah.
And even here, Tanya Guillaume, who is the priest, the Dasen priest here, said to me that, I don't know where in Switzerland, yes, in Appenzell, she had a paroisse, and she had a box with toys in the temple, and that once when she came in the temple, she saw that the children had taken out the toys and were playing with them. So it's very interesting to see that. I know that at a certain stage in history, play was forbidden in churches, but it comes back. It's not something impossible to think about. And I don't know how it is in Israel.
Synagogues?
Yes.
Synagogue is a complex normally, and there is some synagogues there's like a space which is with toys for children to play outside the main hall, and let everybody else play. And even some of the mothers, they come and look after and see that everything is okay. So the rest can pray, and but in certain places it's not official, but yes. So they are they play all the time, but not within the ceremony, but adjacent rooms.
Merci pour cette programmation, pour cette belle présentation. À ce propos, il y a aussi dans les églises catholiques, maintenant, il y a quelques prêtres qui organisent un espace pour les enfants avec des choses pour des petites activités ludiques pour les entretenir. C'est pas partout, mais il y a ces initiatives. Donc, même dans les églises, il y a quelquefois pendant la messe pour ne pas pour ne pas les autres. Et pour merci pour cette suggestion qui nous a présentée. Et aussi, ce lien, c'est toujours fort. Je pense aussi au passage de Platon d'Ulysses qu'on a commenté autrefois ensemble. Et il y a aussi, là, il joue dans le gymnase, mais il joue les jours des Hermès, donc la fête d'Hermès, qui c'est le dieu de cette divination du hasard, de la cléromancie, de toute cette forme de divination mineure, entre guillemets, mais liée au hasard, à la source, tous ces éléments de chance, comme on dirait en anglais. Et après, ils jouent après la fête, après la cérémonie, et donc ils ont tout, Platon aussi remarque qu'ils ont tous les vêtus dans ces habits solennels, de fête. Donc c'est toujours ce lien entre actes religieux, sacrifice, propitiation de la divinité, et après cette rite ludique, comme là c'est aussi un jeu d'osselet, c'est une confrontation donc, ludique. Après les sacrifices, mais c'est vraiment un ensemble social.
C'est intéressant, c'est qu'Hermès gouverne justement ce type-là de divination, et Hermès est proche des enfants. Et Eros, qui joue beaucoup aux osselets, est un enfant. Donc il y a une communauté là aussi, une configuration qui fait sens. And Michel Monson, who is a historian of play and toys, told me that in Middle Ages, children used to play in cemeteries a lot. And in cemeteries because it's close to a church. And that a certain stage, what date, he must tell us more precisely what date, it was forbidden by the church. It was enough of children playing in the cemetery. So again, it's our modern view that it is incompatible to play and in some places, sacred places. But yes, it could be different. So this is food for thought. Yeah.
So, another question.
I was wondering if there's any reflection of the idea that games are something that children normally don't learn from the adults, but from the brothers and sisters. It's like, I don't know, that's the way it is today. I think children, they teach each other how to play normally. So it's like a closed society. They even, in Hebrew, they even have names for games, they use the accent differently. The accent is not in the right place of the word, only for games. It's like their own language.
Yes, yes.
So,
and I think that's why our children, my children, love video games because we understand nothing at all about it.
It's like us trying to speak Latin so they don't understand.
It's another world, and it's their world.
And
but here Plato, of course, speaks about younger children, but this text has never been really exploited for all it says. We really have games which come by natural instinct, and they generally invent them whenever they meet together. So all these elements are very important. Very, very important. And so, for sure, they all knew that children invent. And it's even more important because for later on, Plato and Aristotle will say it's very important not to invent games. Because when you become grown up, when you must train to respect the law. And the first law you respect is the law given for the game. So you must not change the rules. If you change the rules, it means that you will be revolutionary when you are old. And Aristotle says that really one hasn't paid enough attention to games of the citizens, because this is something very, very important. If we want to keep the society coherent, we must watch that. But it is for older. But the young ones are free, so they are even free to do stupid things in sanctuaries or to initiate things. Yes. So there are no more questions.
Other questions? No, any questions? So the last button.
Yes.
Another?
You want to add that in the passage of Paul Lux,
yes,
there is a double level of substitution. Instead of images, an apple instead of a head of an animal or an ox. But also the word melon signifies a goat, an animal, and also an apple.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes, absolutely right. Thank you.
This is not a question, but I have just a little story. Perhaps I may tell. I don't know if you know the. Some years ago, there was in the Netherlands, especially, but also in Germany, there was Herman van Veen. I don't know if you know Herman van Veen. He was a poet and a songwriter and entertainer with a little bit alternative touch. And he when he performed, he sang songs, he gave poems and little sketches, something like that. And one of the stories he told was the following. So God comes down on earth and he finds himself in a church. And the church is a big room, relatively cold, dark, 2 or 3 persons inside the church in silence. and he's wondering what's going on. And all of a sudden he sees another guy in a black coat with the head covered like this, who comes out of somewhere and crosses the church inside, goes to the other side. And he stops him and says, pardon, can I ask you something? And the guy says, not so loud. This is the house of God. And God says, so if this is the house of God, why isn't the sun shining here? Why aren't there any flowers? And why aren't there any children playing around here? And the guy says, looks at him, he doesn't understand at all what he says. He looks at him and he goes away. And then God leaves the church, and in front of the church there's a bench, and there's an old man sitting on the bench and enjoying the sun that shines on him warm. And God approaches him and sits beside him on the bench, and he says, "Hi, colleague."
Any question? No? So, the last one, not the least, is the presentation Thomas here. He's a PhD student and he's working about the games tools from the Gulf, from Mongolia. And today on the specific on the games from the sanctuary. Thank you very much.
Thank you. First of all, thank you to Madame Dasen for allowing me to speak today. Let me introduce myself. As a member of the Locus Ludi project, my work is to recover the maximum archaeological documents about play and games in Roman Gauls. In this allocution, I will show you a part of my results of the study of Aventicum's material. The small town of Avenches is located in Switzerland, in the so-called Bois Plain. This geographic situation attracts quickly humans in Neolithic times. Actually, the place is situated in a strategic location conducive to trade, with its proximity with an hydrographic network linking the Lake of Morat. Here, you see, you don't see my arrow. The Lake of Morat, the Lake of Neuchâtel, and the Lake of Bienne. And relate the Rhine Basin. It is also situated on the road linking the west to east and north to south. For these reasons, Romans built the city that will soon become the Roman capital of Helvetians. The town is so important that it is mentioned in the Pöttinger's map. During a long time, scientists believed that Aventicum was only a Roman creation. However, prospections show that Celts had settled down in an oppidum on the hill of Bois de Châtel. It is situated here. In south of the Roman town. In the occidental area of the Roman town, many burials and votive pits were founded too. We will see that this location is important for the construction of Roman sanctuaries. At the very beginning of the 1st century AD, the town is built with a orthogonal Roman plan. Due to its very quick development and prosperity, the town rose to the status of colonia and received the name Colonia Pia Flavia Constans Emerita Helvetiorum Federata. This colonia continued to grow until the 3rd century AD, with the Alemanni Seix and its abandonment by Rome around 280 AD. I will present the town. So here you have the forum. Around you have the insulae. Here the richer part of the town with the administrative palace, amphitheater, and the occidental sacred area with three, I don't know if you correctly see, 3 temples here and 2 sanctuaries here with a theater. Now we will identify all the known sanctuaries of Avanticum and see what type of ludic artifacts were founded. I have to say that none of these objects has GPS coordinates. I tried to replace them as precisely I was able to. Few of these artifacts were replaced in the exact pit or local, but rather in the right sanctuary. 3 sacred areas are identified: the forum, the most important, the occidental area, and the most particular in the necropolis of Anchapli. I will show this necropolis. The necropolis of Anchapli is situated here, between the town and the lake of Morat. Let's begin with the forum. There are 2 main sacred sectors. The area sacra may be dedicated to the imperial family, and the public building against the Insula 23. So the area sacra here and the public building just here. We must mention that the forum is really not well known. Only 2 excavations took place in the northern limits and in the southwest corner of the forum. In 2015, geophysics prospection were used to reveal a forum tripartitum and to identify a lot of its building, but we don't have any idea of the real cults practiced in the area sacra and in the Insula 23. Forgive me. 3 tokens were found in the place of the temple on the area sacra, but we don't know the discovery context, neither the datation. We can note that one of them is burned. It's the only one burned we found in the sanctuaries of Avanticum. The public building of Insula 23 is better documented. Archaeologists found 22 bones tokens of different types, 2 flat surfaces with or without a center hallmark, and fewer with concentric circle engraved. It is important to note that only the first ones are inscribed with number and maybe letters. 7 glass and 7 stone tokens were also founded with a bone dice. However, all this wonderful ludic assemblage is dated between 50 and 120 AD, and we know that this building was a thermal one only until the beginning of the 2nd century AD, when it is transformed in a public one, maybe cultic, cultural place. So this assemblage went from the thermal building and not from the public one. So we can forget it. But you see the tokens, the bone tokens, the glass one, the dice, and the stone ones. We also found 2 fragments that archaeologists of Avanches identified as game board, but as you can see, don't look like a board game like La Tronqueuse or the Ode King Scripta. To me, these fragments are probably not part of a board game. The second and probably the most important sacred area of Avanticum is the occidental one. Inside, there are 5 sanctuaries. The temple of Derrière la Tour may be dedicated to Juno. The temple of Grange des Dîmes may be dedicated to imperial cults or Mercure, Jupiter, Taranis, and Hercules. Here. The Rhone temple, we don't know for which divinity it is consecrated. The sanctuary of Sigonier, dedicated to Lugoves, a Celtic form of Jupiter, and to imperial cults. Here. And finally, the sanctuary of Lavoie may be dedicated, among authors, to Suleviae goddesses. Here. Here you have the theater of Avanches. On the slope of the hill hosting the actual town of Avanches is one of the oldest sacred locations before the construction of the Masonry temple. The site was first funerary between the end of the 2nd century BC and probably the beginning of the 3rd century AD. In this chronology, we can see the heroization of a Latinian burial with the creation of a wood palisade. The wood palisade here, and the burial is under on the top, and then the adding of votive pits. At the half of the same century, all is covered with ground to dig pits containing votive artifacts, but nobody is buried in the place anymore. 1 or 2 decades later, the Gallo-Roman fanum is built in red. 2 ceramic tokens were found in a votive pit under the cella. The first one is discoidal, but the other is broken on its half. We can see that ceramic tokens were probably used in a cultural context before the construction of the Masonry temple, and above all some were broken during the ritual. This phenomenon will also be present in the next 2 phases with the adding of square-shaped tokens. It's important to know that the last one will be found in the cella of the temple. The last characteristic we can show for this sanctuary is the use of the non-local ceramic. One made in terra sigillata and imported in Switzerland from Italy, but also the use of the unique Gallo-Belgian token found in Avanticum. We can suppose that these tokens were used for ritual ceremony, but we can also imagine that they were used as counting unit. Actually, we found a fragment of balance to weight coins. This temple, probably dedicated to Juno and situated in the highest hill of Avanches, can be compared with the temple of Juno Moneta located on the Capitolium in Roma. In this place, coins were produced, and like the temple of Saturn, we can imagine there were some accountant offices in the temple of Derrière la Tour. There is the type of tokens. So the semi-ceramic tokens, the round token, and the square shape, and the only one bone found on the side. Like the temple of Derrière la Tour, the round temple construction was preceded by funerary activities with the burying of 2 Latinian adults. These graves were later enclosed with a so-called fanum, at the beginning of the 1st century AD, in association with a big votive pit before being covered by the masonry dodecahedral temple in the half of the 1st century AD. So you have the big pit under the steps, and here the so-called first funnel. In this way, we can see that there is no rupture between Celtic and Roman occupation in this part of the Occidental area, because there is a kind of transformation from a cultural funerary phenomenon to only cultural practices via an heroization phenomenon in the turning point of the 1st century AD. The material discovered comes from the heroization phase without precise location and from a votive pit associated with the monumental masonry temple. The problem is the number of these artifacts, only 5, but all are discoidal ceramic tokens. The 3rd sanctuary of the Grange des Dîmes, only known by few excavations, useless to define the real planimetry and organization of the whole complex. Unlike the 2 last temples in this location, the first human activity seems to have appeared only at the beginning of the 1st century AD without covering any grave. "49 ceramic tokens, including discoidal, square shape, and broken ones, were found during all occupation of the site, but only in the long trenches dug few meters to the north and of the masonry, the 4th one. These trenches were used to put a wood palisade that enclosed the sacred area. The location of all these tokens demonstrates a deep attachment to the Celtic rituals during all the 1st century of Roman occupation. Indeed, Celts were used to put votives artifacts in the trenches of sanctuary wall, like boar bones, grindstones, coins, and so on. This conferred an apotropaic protection to the sanctuary. Other less frequent types of tokens were found only during the 2nd half of the 1st century AD, like 4 bones ones. One of them is bored in the middle. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Maybe a token used as an amulet and then offered as votive item in the sanctuary. Another token, a stone one, was discovered. The last is unique by its tronconical shape. It looks like a weight, but I haven't weighed it yet to verify this theory. Finally, 2 glass tokens were found in this sanctuary and dated between 150 and 300 AD. Both have special, either unique characteristics they don't share with common glass tokens. The first one is just cut in the cubic bottle and have a natural color. These types are not surprising, but really rare in Aventicum, only 2 ones. However, the most interesting is and unique in all Gallic territory is the one having a common plano-convex shape, but also covered with a silver leaf, the token in the center of the slide. To finish with this sanctuary, it's important to say that only ceramic tokens were found in trenches. The other tokens were found in the sacred area, but I have not more information yet. The occidental sacred area is enlarged at the turning point of the 2nd century AD in the southeast part of the urban territory. The monumental complex of Cigognier, facing the theatre dedicated to imperial cults, is built at the same time. However, archaeology shown that some rectangular buildings were placed in the same area since the beginning of the 1st century AD. And a fragment of epigraphy, probably a part of a base of a statue, dedicated by an imperial priest, could testify an imperial cult and at this period. Like in other sanctuaries, the ceramic tokens are the most numerous ones, and the most are dated between 50 and 150 AD. However, in this case, I have no information yet about their precise location, but following the previous cases, I carefully make the hypothesis that they were found in pits. We also have few bones tokens, but we also have only 5 unique astragal of Avantico. They were found in the backfill layer, but in a ground level. 2 of them are 5 centimeters long, probably belonging to a mountain goat, and both bored by 2 mm diameter holes through the plantar and dorsal faces. Plantar is this face, and dorsal this face. Oh, yes. Plantar and dorsal. These holes are useful to place a maximum disposition of the holes are useful to place a maximum of astragal on the thread, because in this way they occupy minimum space. The diameter of the holes probably indicate the use of metallic thread and are thinner than the hole visible on the astragal found in the necropolis of Locri-Épizéphry. Here. The same types of hole are visible on the 3 astragals measuring 4 centimeters long, but seems not to have been executed carefully. Actually, one is bored through plantar and dorsal faces, one through lateral and medial faces, and one through the top of the astragal and the dorsal face. An additional traceology observation of the astragals faces is useful. I compare Roman astragals with those used by Madame Dasen since a long time for games. Thanks to these astragals, I can put the hypothesis that the 3 Roman ones measuring 4 centimeters were often used, unlike the 2 bigger ones. If we consider the astragals as toys, we can be sure that the 3 first were used and then offered in the sanctuary. However, as toys, the 2 others, the larger and useless, the larger are useless because their size become to be a problem to take many other in one end, which might explain where there is no use marks. If we consider the astragals like cultural tools, we have less interpretation problems. Actually, the astragals were used for divination, and it is possible that the 3 smaller ones were used for this reason in the sanctuary, and then replaced together in a precious metallic thread. The 2 other ones, too big to play with, could have been picked from a victim and dedicated to the god without using them. This hypothesis to me is probable because the bones are bigger on a wild animal, and the capture of one of them by a sedentary civilization is synonym to get a trophy, favorable for a qualitative sacrifice. The last sanctuary of the Occidental sacred area is the Lavoué. This one is not well known because of the punctual excavation characterized only by trenches, but archaeologists collected interesting data. Like the first temple we have seen, 2 burials dated between the 2nd and the 1st century BC, connected to a votive pit used until 30 BC. Unfortunately, the structures are too badly preserved and the site too badly known to see if there is a sacred continuation between 30 BC to the construction of the masonry enclosure at the end of the 1st century AD. Around 50 years later, 2 fana are built against the enclosure and facing the place between the sanctuary of Cigognier and the theatre. At the same time, a mysterious quadriporticus construction enclosing a courtyard and fitted with a canalization is built in the south corner of the complex. This building. One more time, ceramic tokens are the most numerous, 33 ones. We can see that 4 of them dated from the half of the 1st century BC, found in a pit. 22 dated between 50 and 150 AD, but the precise context is not known yet. With surprise, we can underline the tardive use of the sanctuary with 5 ceramic tokens dated between 150 and the 5th century AD. As usual, the bone tokens are rare and not well dated. We can note the use of the same types of contours than in other sanctuaries, and the flat one has the number 3 engraved. However, the most interesting find in this sanctuary, and you see it, is the fragment of what was supposed to be a ceramic horse pulled on wheels. We see the hole using to insert the axle, probably made in wood, and holding the ceramic wheels. We found some example of these horses in a vicus attached to a military camp in Rasboeni Cetate, situated on the Dacian territory. There's ones. And 2 kept in the Museum of Cologne. The presence of such toy in a sanctuary is probably due to a votive depositional related to the transition to the adulthood. We finish our visit of the sanctuary of Avanticum with the special case of the necropolis of Anchapi. This necropolis is situated about 500 meters to north of Avanticum, between the town and the lake of Mora. The necropolis is separated from 2 fana and at the end of the 3rd century AD. The older and probably the more interesting for us is the North Fanum. The last is built on a late Latinian grave. So, yeah. The North Fanum is this one, and the necropolis here is here. The same phenomenon of heroization seems to be visible like in the oldest sanctuaries of the Occidental sacred area. In this northern Fanum, there are only 2 ludic artifacts, but both tokens, but very special ones. The first, and I have no picture, is an iron discoidal token dated from the beginning of the 1st century AD and found in the cella, in the red point you see in the cella. The second one is carefully carved glass token dated between 50 and 150 AD. Another hypothesis says that it is bottom dated from the 19th century and lost on the site. For the moment, no similar token has been founded to choose one of both solutions. Archaeologists found it inside the sacred area of the North Fanum. Now, it's interesting to replace all artifacts in a distribution map of the town. The first one, characterized by the red color, shows that before the 1st century AD, very few artifacts are present. We only see ceramic tokens and the so-called game board. The second phase, characterized in blue, shows that only ceramic tokens are used in sanctuary like in the previous period. We also see that relative to this last period, the occidental area used more tokens in the pits. The third period, characterized with green color, is important because of the creation of the colonia in 71 AD and the building of the sanctuaries of Sigonier, Lavoie and the theater. This period shows a big diversity with the materials, with the use of bone, stone and metal, but ceramic stayed the main material used. The diversity is visible with the material and also with the introduction of two other types of games, astragals and ceramic ores. Of course, we can forget the assemblage found in the Insula 23, so here. Because we saw that it was associated with thermite. The last phase, characterized in purple, show an impoverishment in number and diversity. Bone continue to be used in few number. Ceramic is always the main material, and we note that the introduction of glass at the end of the Roman occupation. Especially the glass token covered with a silver leaf can show the last elite action in sanctuaries. So the bone one is here and the glass two here. The final map combining the four periods show a general spreading of ludic artifacts in the sanctuaries of Avantico. As you can see, the older temples, the Derrière la Tour and the round one, is well furnished between the Augustan period and the first part of the 1st century. The sanctuaries of Grange des Dîmes, Sigonier and Lavoie are well furnished in all their occupation periods, and we can note a particular tardive use of the Lavoie. Remember, the Lavoie is this one. To conclude my allocution, we can observe that typologically the tokens are more used, and this in all the occupation periods, especially the ceramic tokens, taking different shapes, were used in number and always in votive trenches or pit, without one found under the cella of the first temple we see. Bone, metal and stone appeared at the end of the 1st century AD, and the rare glass tokens in tardive occupation. Astragal and ceramic toy are underrepresented and only in the 3rd phase. We also saw that the function of the ludic artifacts no longer are properly ludic. We can cite the example of the broken ceramic, probably used in funerary rituals, the other ceramic tokens are systematically founded in votive pits or used as apotropaic elements in palisade trenches. We also have the case of knuckle bones, probably used as divination tool or votive item for the gods, and the ceramic horse toy gave to the god to have their protection during the adulthood of the owner. Finally, I have to say a last important information. We don't find the following item in the sanctuaries: board games, common glass tokens, often plano-convex, blue, black, white, and a few other colors. We saw only special and unique ones. No dices, no dolls, no spinning tops, no balls. And the artifacts you saw are only a tiny part of what I found in general for Aventicum. As you can see, the number of the board games, for example, 13, or glass token, ceramic tokens, bone tokens, metal tokens, stone ones, and dices. Thank you for your attention.
So, any question?
You have a picture of the board games or not?
Yes,
Just for a quick look.
the board game.
Board
Which one?
games,
Yes.
yes. Just for a quick look.
Yes.
From temples, but from the town.
Ah, okay.
But if these are board games, about what you have heard, that it's difficult when it's fragmentary, so
Yeah.
any question marks?
To compare,
Yes.
I have it in the file. We'll try to open it.
Avec le recopie d'écran.
Copie d'écran. Ah, sur le...
Ah, là, on voit les coucher.
Yes.
Just a quick look, so that we
Yeah.
have an idea.
We can, we don't see very well, but it's a fragment of Duodecim scripta. There is circle here, and yeah, a few circle. This is the ones, fragment ones, but we don't know
This
if
is certainly something else.
Yes.
yeah. This one, circular, with two fragments of circle, but we don't know anymore. Stone with a grid. maybe Batumful, Duodecim scripta, mysterious one with 3 circles engraved, and the most beautiful one. Against the grid. A third grid. But the lines are obliques. It's
Yeah.
you know we don't see. Let's see. That's enough.
Thank you. Thank you.
Concerning the excavations and Aventicum, not very good.
No.
Because if you have a context, and they say chronologically that runs from 50 to 150, so this means you have no context at all, and no chronology at all, no stratigraphy at all.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately one cannot draw any conclusions about something like this. If you find anywhere one counter in 100 years, what does this mean? So it's useless. It doesn't tell anything. Maybe somebody just lost it, or
I think we can precise the datation of the tokens by the studying of the archive of the excavation archive. I didn't.
One should try to narrow it down, context, because otherwise.
It's the goal now to carefully study the archive. It's a long work.
One question. Do you agree? Is a counter is a token with the
with the concentric circles. These are usually you find them very, very often in great numbers, and they are usually identified as counters.
Counters. Okay.
Well,
I also saw that in general, in Aventicum, we saw that the counter having 2 faces, 2 flat faces, are the most engraved with number or letters. The other is rare.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.